proportion of travellers that get to third level is way below even their percentage as of the whole overall population, and correspondingly the amount of travellers as a proportion of the prison population is higher. And these statistics, you'll see them in Australia with Aboriginal people, you'll see them with African Americans in the United States. So clearly travellers are victims of state racism in Ireland and have been. The other group that I'll mention are asylum seekers, and somebody mentioned asylum seekers there recently. So you have people coming to Ireland fleeing religious, political persecution maybe, for various reasons. The same reasons that Irish people immigrated since the 1840s. And how are these people treated? Firstly, we were talking here about the rights that migrant workers have. These people do not have the right to work at all. They do not have the right to third level education. And there was a report in RT, I don't know, was it last night or the night before, where people who come here as minors seeking asylum go through the school process, but once they reach the age of 18, they're taken out of the care of the HSE and given over to the Department of Justice to RIA, the Reception and Integration Agency. I think it's an Orwellian name, it's probably the Deportation and something else agency. But anyway, and yeah, but they're, you could have 7 A's on your leaving cert, and you will not be allowed to go to university. They're housed in what's called direct provision, which is a system of basically open prisons. And I suppose the nearest one here to us is up at the Kinsale Road, and anybody that ever went in there or tried to get in there, there's a private security firm where they take the registration of your car, your name or whatever, who you're visiting, and you're only allowed to see if you have friends in there in a reception area. They're not allowed to bring you. This week there was another mass deportation to Nigeria where up to 24 people were taken, and over the last maybe 7 or 8 months or so, in each of these deportation flights, it means the breaking up of families. Generally the father and husband is taken, leaving a wife and children behind. So that's, and how state racism demonstrates itself here. What I want to talk about now, and probably maybe something that may be controversial, but hopefully it might generate debate, and that's another form of racism that's been in existence, I suppose, for the last maybe about 20 years, but it is generating momentum at the moment, and that's Islamophobia. And that's targeting people based on their religion, Islam, but it's more than that. Now, the view in the popular media is that this is a reaction to 9/11, and we have to guard against terrorism, etc., etc. But it goes back further than that, the origins of it, and with the ending of the Cold War, in theory, NATO as a military organisation should have ceased to exist. Communism is gone. Why do we need? But there was a book brought out by one of the ideologues of US imperialism, a man by the name of Samuel Huntington, and he talked about the clash of civilizations. And the case he was making basically was that Islam was a more backward, inferior culture and religion than the Christian West. They didn't have an enlightenment. Look at the way they treat women, look at the way they treat gay people, etc. And that kind of continued and obviously accelerated after 9/11. And how it's affecting mainly Muslim men is that people are being taken in Britain into places like Belmarsh with anti-terrorism legislation that allows that to happen without normal due process. Everybody is aware, obviously, of Abu Ghraib, of Guantanamo, Bagram in Kabul, Diego Garcia, and these places around the world. And the other way Muslim people are being targeted is Muslim women and over their dress, particularly headwear. It began in France, I suppose, in 2003 with the banning of the hijab, the headscarf, for second-level schools under the name of secularism. But yesterday, I think the lower house of the Belgian Parliament passed a law that makes it now a criminal offence for a Muslim woman to wear either the niqab, the face veil, or the burqa in public in Belgium. Now that has to be ratified by the Senate or whatever, and we know there's probably going to be an election there, so it will take a while. But in some of the subdivisions within Belgium, this is already law. Now, the amount of Muslim women in Europe that would be wearing the burqa is very small. It's almost non-existent. Slightly more people wearing the veil, the niqab. Obviously, a lot more wearing the hijab. You had a referendum in Switzerland in December last, which has outlawed the building of minarets and mosques in Switzerland. And equally, you've a report back from a parliamentary subcommittee in France that's recommending, again, the outlawing of the niqab, the hijab and the burqa in public places. Now, there have been mutterings by a number of politicians here over the number of years raising this question on the pretense we need to debate it. But early on March last, there was 7 Muslim people taken into custody from Cork and Waterford, and very high profile, you know, armed Gardaí around the police station in Waterford, helicopters in the sky, and a big high profile media press conference by the Garda, who was acting on intelligence from the FBI of all people, that these people were involved as part of an international conspiracy to murder a racist cartoonist from Sweden. The extension, you know, the time that these people could be held in custody was extended, you know, but the media kind of attention died away, and 5 of the 7 were released without charge. 2 people were held in custody. One guy was eventually charged with false documentation, which he readily admitted to because he arrived here as an asylum seeker, and as I mentioned earlier, denied the right to work. So in order to work, to send money back home, got false documents, he readily admitted to it. He got a 3-month sentence of €1,500 fine, and obviously a deportation when that's finished. The second guy was charged with sending an offensive text to somebody in the USA that had nothing to do with the so-called conspiracy against the Swedish cartoonist. And it was laughable in one way because, you know, it was real gutter press stuff. They were talking about this person, Jihad Jane, who was kind of controlling the whole thing from the United States. Now, if you contrast the way those people were treated and the way bail was denied to people for relatively, you know, false documentation, sending a text, with the way the killers of Tayosi Shitabe were treated in Dublin, where firstly the guy who killed him was only been charged with manslaughter, and both himself and his brother were released on bail almost immediately. Now, I've spoken to a number of Muslim people in Cork in relation to that case in Waterford, and obviously they're concerned about it, and there's 2 views within the Muslim community. One is that people should keep their heads down and hopefully they won't be singled out. But as Irish people, you know, we know from the last 30 years with the armed struggle in the north that Irish people in Britain have been picked up, innocent people, you know, who haven't kind of put their heads up, and, you know, we saw what happened as a result of that. And there's other people obviously willing, you know, talking about the need to come out and to oppose what's happening. So, I suppose, just to sum up, as I said earlier, racism is more than just a few misguided, ignorant people. It goes hand in hand with the concept of nationalism and the nation state. And you've racism on 3 levels, I would say. On the individual level, you've institutional racism and you've state racism. And unless we're aware of those different levels of racism, and unless we name it and take it on, it will continue, and the state will still get away with introducing legislation that Noel and Claire spoke about, equality legislation. But that equality legislation, even though it applies to, you know, it's allegedly illegal to discriminate against people based on their race, that legislation does not apply to citizenship and immigration. So they can treat those people as they please. The second point, I mentioned earlier that racism hasn't always existed, so therefore we can have a society where racism will no longer exist. And how do we achieve it? Firstly, I think we need to recognise racism, as I said earlier. Secondly, solidarity. We need to stand with everybody in this country who's a victim of racism, whether it's Roma people, whether it's asylum seekers, whether it's Eastern Europeans, whether it's travellers. And that way we can make a change. But if we want to live in a society without racism, there's only one solution: revolution. We need to overthrow this rotten capitalist system. Thank you.